Welcome to Lead Today with me, Kalina. Let's talk leadership. Hey, and welcome back. Today we're going to do a little bit of admin, let's say. Since we talked about relocation, I just want to go through a few of your options for work visas with the caveat or the disclaimer that I am not an immigration attorney. I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is purely from my own research, and hopefully this helps you. We'll also cover a little bit about vehicles, but again, I am not an auto importer. I am not a lawyer. This is purely anecdotal, informational, educational, and my experience to give you some ideas. Canadians in particular have a lot of options because of, well, our proximity to our lovely southern neighbor. So we'll just run through a few options, but at the end of the day, get a really good immigration attorney. If you want one, I know one, reach out to me. You can chat with her. She's amazing and has done great work for me. I'm not going to share publicly just because I haven't actually asked her and don't know if she wants that. But if you need a visa and you want to work with someone great, please reach out and I'd be happy to connect you. At the end of the day, that's really the first step and the biggest step and the best advice that I could give you is get a great immigration attorney, because you can do all the research in the world, but especially with some of these more involved visa categories, you're going to need help. So that's advice point number one. Get a really good attorney. And I think that probably is good advice for anything major, is have a good attorney, have a good accountant, have professionals in your corner that know what they're doing, not just from a rule perspective, but from a catering to your needs perspective. I find a lot of professionals, and I mean, as a coach, I have my own, I suppose, philosophy, but I do think it's similar. It's not the same as, let's say, a doctor or a lawyer, but even, going to do your hair, any professional in their field, they need to be good at what they do, yes, but they also need to be good at listening to you, because I find so many people will go to someone because maybe they have good reviews or maybe they were referred, but then when they talk to the person, something feels off. It doesn't feel like a good fit for you. And I just think that the era of that is so over and tired. Like, move on, Like, do not work with someone that doesn't treat you well. I know friends who their accountants don't answer them or they don't like them. I've had experiences with accountants where, it just isn't a fit. And it's not that, okay, I'm right and they're wrong, or I'm good and they're bad. It's not an evaluation like that at all. But it is to say, okay, hello, work with people that you want to work with that are, yes, competent, but also use a philosophy and approach that works for you, communicate with you in a way that's respectful, that you get along with. I mean, this sounds common sense saying it, and yet how many of us work with people just because that's who comes recommended, or that's who is on that first list? Like, do a bit of due diligence and your life for the entirety of the process, or at the end of that haircut is going to be so much better. And I think we just kind of fall, even your dentist, like, people just kind of, you go to the dentist your parents went to or that's close by or whatever. It's like, no, find a dentist that actually aligns with your philosophy on how you want to care about your teeth, which sounds ridiculous. Like, what? You have to source your dentist? Yeah, you do. You could find a dentist that is a biological dentist that does things holistically, or, if that matters to you, whatever. Anyway, that's not what this episode's about. I could rant for a long time. I just think that you have preferences, values for a reason, and absolutely why would you not find a provider in any regard that makes sense for you? I just think it's time consuming on the front end. And so we kind of just go with the first, or we sort of, if somebody kind of falls into our lap, we'll go with that. But really, at least evaluate 3 options. Yeah. Not that you don't. Maybe you don't. Sometimes I don't. And then I regret it because actually, with the first portion of this whole visa process, my work visa, I did go with someone that was referred from another lawyer and trusted that and absolutely had a terrible time. Ended up getting most of my money back because the filing was not professionally done, was not complete. It was not a proper filing. And only when I really went and we did more of a search and due diligence did we find somebody, the lovely lawyer that I mentioned earlier, who really was able to understand our situation and did a professional job. So I'm actually speaking from being a person that went with a referral that did not look into options and really got the short end of the stick there. So you're not alone. That's I have done it too, and I've paid royally in terms of it's not just a money question, right? It's like a time and effort question. You get delayed. Like this delayed my visa filing for months because it just not properly filed the first time because of this attorney's lack of I don't not doing a full filing, let's put it like that. Just not collecting everything that needed to be collected and me not doing a proper job of vetting more options. So, don't do that. Find some options. Check out the lawyer that I have, but also have a few others. Don't just go with the first thing. Okay, so what's possible? Well, there's a TN visa. People talk about that a lot. It's for certain professional jobs. We're talking accountants, engineers, scientists, teachers. You do have to have a job offer in the United States. So, you need a degree, relevant credentials, and that job offer. There's a list of them under the USMCA. So, I would say if you're a teacher, engineer, doctor, scientist, accountant, one of those professional career categories, that might be for you. You can apply for that directly at the border, so port of entry. So that's at a land border or airport, and valid up to 3 years. You can renew it. Similarly, but a bit more difficult, and it has these categories is the H-1B visa. They're opening months, so it's like certain times that you can get the H-1B. There is a lottery system for applicants. Processing can take months. Visas are issued each fiscal year, so there's this cap on the number of them. It's lottery. H-1B is much harder, and it's really looking for technical expertise. So we're talking IT, engineering, or medical. So if you're in those fields, you need most likely at least a bachelor's and some work experience. So I guess if you're in IT, go for it. It's just that lottery system, and it's a little bit tougher than the TN because there's that cap, and it's there's a certain time period. I think it's February or March that you have to apply by. So it's sort of like you got to catch the window or else not going to work. The L-1 visa is an intra-company transfer. It's visa for employees of multinational companies who are being transferred to a U.S. office. There's an L-1A for managers and executives and an L-1B for employees with specialized knowledge. The U.S. employer has to submit a petition for you to the USCIS, and the Canadian employee must have worked for the company for at least one continuous year within the last 3 years. It is valid for up to 7 years. The L-1A, so that's the manager executive one. L-1B is valid for up to 5. L-1B, again, specialized knowledge, so you can be an employee. Now, this means you've got to have an employer in the U.S. again, so totally possible. Just you're going to be reliant on an employer unless you're the employer. If you have an American business, you can submit a petition this way via that business. But you have to have been employed for the company for at least 1 year, and there's a huge burden of proof for this category, both L-1A and L-1B. A is for managers and executives, B is for employees with specialized knowledge. but you can submit this for premium processing. The fee is around $2,800, I think currently, something like that. And that means your case gets adjudicated within 15 calendar days. So you get that decision faster than some of these others that can take months, H-1B included. Again, the TN, you can really show up at the border if you want to, but that can be tough, if you go, and I've done this actually, if you go to the border, it's challenging because if everything isn't 100% squared away and they, for whatever reason, find that it's not okay, you're sent back. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you've spent a day and now you got an answer you didn't want and you made all these plans. So my thought is the USCIS, the US Citizenship and Immigration Services, going through them and getting that answer, to me, is a better route, just because you're not, standing at the border hoping that it works. So that's my thought there based on personal experience. But of course, this is educational, this is informational, get advice from an attorney. The L-1A, as I said, up to 7 years. L-1B, so L-1A manager, L-1B specialized knowledge. You got 7 and 5 years, but these do have renewals. So you're going to be probably valid for 2 or 3 years, and then you need to renew the category. So it's not like you get issued something for 7 years. So just being aware that there will be filing fees again, attorney fees again after that 2 or 3 year mark. Just bear that in mind. Okay, E2, investor visa. I have people kind of that toy with the idea of getting a visa. They talk to me about this one a lot, but it's not easy, quote unquote, as people might say. I mean, you've got to invest a substantial amount of capital into a U.S. business, and you've got to develop and direct the enterprise which you invest in, but it needs to be, you need to show that you will generate income beyond just yourself, just supporting the applicant. So they're going to want some employees. There isn't, from my understanding, a set number. There's another visa category called EB5. So this one is E2. There's EB5. EB5 wants you to create or preserve at least 10 full-time jobs in the US. And it's for a new commercial enterprise. Once the investment and job creation requirements are met, the applicant and their family can obtain conditional permanent residency. So this is a visa that actually leads to a green card and permanent residency if the investment requirements are fulfilled. So it's a good moment to say, hey, is this a non-resident, a non-immigrant, or an immigrant visa? Immigrant meaning leads to green card. Non-immigrant means does not lead to green card. It's temporary. It's a non-immigrant. So the categories that we mentioned, TN, H-1B, L-1 visas, those are all non-immigrant visas, meaning you will not get a green card out of the deal. Okay, so you're just getting the time that is set. You are expected to return back to Canada, or I suppose wherever, but these are Canadian examples that I'm giving. So just be aware, are you doing something to immigrate more permanently? Do you want a green card? Or are you doing this to work for a set amount of time and go back? The E2, I believe, is also non-immigrant and less requirements than the EB5. But again, you need a substantial amount of money. The number that gets tossed around is 800,000 to $1 million or so in a U.S. business. And again, that ability to show that you're bringing jobs to the U.S., so it's not just you, is more compelling. The E2 is typically granted for 2 years, but you can renew it indefinitely as long as the business remains operational. Again, what's your game plan? If you're every 2 years having to renew a visa, legal fees, filing fees, and just the general uncertainty, if you're planning on being here, might not be a long-term plan, but up to you, depending on your vision and what you're doing. So thinking about that would be important. O-1 visa, extraordinary ability. I know a gentleman that had this that was a director. It applies to people who have achieved recognition in their field at a national or international level. The employer must petition for the applicant. You need substantial documentation showing individuals' extraordinary qualifications. It's valid up to 3 years, extended in increments of 1 year. We're talking, Olympians, people that have won awards, artists, athletics, influencers, I think, do actually qualify for this category at this stage of the game, but we're talking, million plus followers, and you've got to show some sort of extraordinary ability. Followers are not enough. You really have to show publications that your work has been adjudicated. You have to show, again, an award is really good. Like if you win some kind of Olympic medal or Nobel Prize or some scientific, award or grant, if you have lots of educational, let's say, publications, you might be able to file for this. Again, remembering this is not actually a visa category. Now, what some people do is they'll start with the non-immigrant categories to show, let's say, that you have extraordinary ability, and then there are often follow-on categories that are immigrant categories, so they are leading to green card. So if you've had a non-immigrant category approved for a certain area, you're more likely to get, well, I shouldn't say that. You've met the burden of proof for that category. And so the thinking would be that if you want the immigrant version of it, you have set a bit of a precedent, right? By having the non-immigrant version and then going to the immigrant version, and you've compiled all that evidence. You've showcased for 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is that you do meet the category requirements. But again, they're completely separate filings. They are unrelated. At the end of the day, they're being adjudicated separately. Each filing is adjudicated separately. So there's no guarantee here. You have to meet their requirements at each renewal or extension period for each filing. Each filing is really its own independent thing. Okay, so that's the O-1. I would say that's a short-term play. Again, you can transfer that. That's if you are extraordinary, which maybe you are. Couple other options. So the ones that everybody knows, these are just short-term. The B1, B2. B1 is for business. B2 is tourist. So if you've ever been to, Miami for the weekend, you probably came in on a B2, tourist. This is usually just with a valid passport. If you plan to work or study, you really need to be careful about what is the business that you're doing under the B1. So, if you have meetings or conferences, it's okay. There's a certain number of speaking engagements per year. That's okay under the B1. There are stipulations. So be thoughtful, careful, read the regulations. If you're coming in under a B1, you really want to adhere to those requirements carefully. I know of someone that was banned from the US for 5 years, if not more. I don't know the ins and outs of the situation, but was banned because he was conducting business affairs and not declaring it. And again, the B1, B2 is a Canadian thing. So if you're not Canadian, I don't know what that category would be, and you probably need a proper work visa. You can't just come in under a B1. And again, there are limited and very specific short-term business activities that are approved under that B1. But you don't have to apply for anything. You can just come in and say what you're doing. Usually a 6-month stay. A lot of snowbirds just do the B2 if you're retired or if you have income from Canada and you can prove that and you're not earning money in the US. You could just have a second home, go down to wherever it is that you have that home and hang out for a couple months and you're good. There is a whole thing about the tax side of things that, again, definitely not an accountant, definitely not giving advice in this arena. But I would speak to an accountant if you are regularly staying for close to those 6 months, and you do have property in both countries, because you might have to just look at, usually it comes down to where are you generating income, but you definitely don't want to pay taxes in the wrong place or pay more taxes than necessary, and certainly avoid double taxation, which there's a list and a burden of proof, as I said, that will make it so that you're paying in the US or Canada. Like there's a kind of deal that the US and Canada struck there so that you're not dealing with too much double taxation. But I mean, the details of that are absolutely individual. I will not get into that. I do not know enough about it whatsoever. So just speak to an accountant if for, the next 3 to 5 years you're thinking of spending 5 months a year in the US. It's totally possible as a tourist. Just have your ducks in a row on the financial side of things and speak with someone that knows what they're talking about. If you're thinking of studying, there's an F-1 student visa. You can do full-time at an accredited institution. Pretty much you have to be accepted to a US institution, certified by the SEVP, Student Exchange Visitor Program. So you get an I-20 form from the school and you apply for that visa. You don't need a stamp, but you just have to show the I-20 at the border. The visa's good for the length of the program. Really standard. I know someone that did, a bunch of people that did college all over the US, Michigan, New York, California. Get the form. It's pretty easy, but there are work kind of stipulations in there, certain number of hours you can do and things. So that would be something to just know, can I work and what's the deal with work while I'm studying? J1, which is an exchange visitor visa. This is a work and study-based exchange program. It's good for interns, au pairs, scholars, trainees. You have to have a sponsoring organization. There's a DS 2019 form before applying. Really, this depends on the program's length. I've seen this for au pairs, coming to nanny for a family. Again, possible specific usage. If that's your use case, you can work and study, and it is for a set amount of time. So if you're in that category, think about the J1 exchange. There is the K1 Fiance. That is for all of the 90-Day Fiance fans. Valid for 90 days, after which you must apply for adjustment of status to become a permanent resident. It's really the U.S. citizen filing a petition with the USCIS on behalf of the Canadian fiancé. This is, I believe, the K1 fiancé visa is just for fiancés across the board, so not just Canadians. Hence the show, 90-Day Fiancé, valid for 90 days. Once you're approved, you can enter the U.S. on that K1, but you need to marry within the 90 days. So that wedding better be planned. You better have some evidence from that wedding. They will look into photos, guest lists, the license, of course, the marriage license. I mean, you've got to have your ducks in a row there. If you watch the show, which I don't, but I've seen snippets, and let's just say it can be a bit of a horror show. So I don't know. If you got a fiance, go for it. It's certainly a bridge, but it's like 3 months. So that's not a long-term option. You got to get in, get married, and adjust to the IR1 or CR1 spouse visa for Canadians married to U.S. citizens or permanent residents who wish to live permanently in the U.S. You need to be sponsored again. You need another petition. Spouse can immigrate to the U.S. and obtain a green card. This takes a long time. I don't believe you can expedite it. It really does take a while. And then once you're waiting for a green card in any category, my understanding is that you have to then also file for a work and travel authorization, or else you can't leave and you can't work. So that's another sort of, let's say, simultaneous filing or action step where you are waiting for the green card. And in that waiting period, you want to be able to travel and work, and you'd have to file for that privilege while you're waiting. So there's that. If you're going fiance to spouse, there's that track. We talked about the EB-5, which is that a green card, it does lead to permanent residency and green card if you fulfill the requirements of investment. But again, you're looking at $800,000 to $1 million plus, and you need to create or preserve 10 full-time jobs. And that's just kind of the basic requirements, right? So they'll really want details about a legitimate business and a legitimate investment there. So I think, oh, the last category. Not sure how many people would be interested in this one, but R1 religious worker, they do have a religious worker visa. If you're a part of religious denomination, and you're coming to the US to work in a religious capacity, you can also have the religious organization in the US file a petition with the USCIS, valid for 5 years. Certainly have options. There are also, I don't believe that's an immigrant category. I don't know, but I don't think so. So again, you've got those 5 years, but then you'd have to file for an extension or renew it. So you just got to really think about, is this a long-term play, or what am I doing here? Because you want to have that game plan beyond those 90 days or 3 years or 5 years or whatever the case is. So figuring out what you're trying to do is a good thing. And of course, speaking with a lawyer who can advise you on your personal situation in a way that can create a plan that makes sense for your vision is going to be the best thing. So, of course, make sure you apply for a category that makes sense for you and what you want long term. Okay. There are a couple of other ways with family and unification. Find anything to do with family. So again, the marriage, like if you have a relative here, all of that is it just takes longer on a processing time basis. Work visas are they're just adjudicated more quickly, again depending on the category, but because of course good labor is hard to find. So if you're in a category where you're desired from an employment perspective, you've definitely got a leg up. There's nothing wrong with the family unification, the spousal stuff. It's just that it's going to take longer on average to go that route. But I know people that have done it, still very possible, very legitimate, just might take longer. And I don't believe you can expedite it. So you're just kind of waiting. Which, hey, if you're cool with that, then you're good. But something to think about. And another thing would be, I know a few individuals that, not just for the US, but other countries, that wish that their parents had applied for them. So that a lot of countries, the US included, especially on familial grounds or naturalization, like heritage, if your parents were born somewhere different from you, and this is, again, not just the US, but if you're a minor, things kind of work more smoothly. So if you are under, I think, depends on the country, but sometimes 18, sometimes 21, you can apply, or your parents would apply for you on the grounds of family ties, naturalization, those types of things. Especially, I know a lot of European countries like Italy, Croatia, they're European countries that work that way as well. Switzerland is by descent as well, so like by blood, by where your parents are from. The United States, if you are born in the US, you're automatically American, right? It's by land. Same thing with Canada. So if you're born there, you are Canadian. But in Europe, a lot, there are a few countries that it's actually from the family line. So your parents are Spanish, your parents are Croatian, your parents are Italian, or grandparents even. Some countries that are struggling with population growth are extending to grandparents. So totally possible to do as an adult, but if you have kids, or if you happen to be under that age that they set, some of them again are like 21 or 22, 3. But if you're able to do that for your kids or for yourself, usually it's just a faster or easier process. It might not be faster, but easier than once you're an adult. You really have to go through the full filing. I went through a process as well, getting an EU passport, and it just takes time and documentation and translation, and it's a whole other that's a whole other thing of becoming a citizen there. But if you have relatives, if your parents are born somewhere else, I would say there's no harm in pursuing other passports unless if one of those countries would require you to give up a citizenship, that's something to consider, So knowing, again, probably a good attorney, but just knowing, even if a Google search, right? Like, okay, does Italy allow you to also have a Canadian and a US passport? Is that okay? Historically, they would make you give up. I've got friends from Germany who had to give up their German citizenship to get the American green card and then citizenship. Now, um, that's, we're talking in the 70s. Now we're in a different phase where I think you are allowed to hold multiple passports, but check the regulations, on your specific situation. So we went through some categories, mostly work visas, some of them more personal. Again, benefits of some of these work categories are that you can expedite the processing so that you have an answer relatively quickly. Some of them you can show up at the border and have the case adjudicated. We know the risks involved, there are pros and cons with that. In case you don't get a favorable adjudication in the moment, you would have to either send it along for further processing to the USCIS or apply again. So again, I cannot emphasize enough, a good lawyer, having a good professional team around you, it's just night and day from what I experienced, at least. So get good people in your corner if you want to go through any of this process, because it's certainly a process, and a little bit of patience never hurt anyone when it comes to these types of things, because it's it's detailed and takes time. There are many requirements. It's an intricate, very precise process. And I did say I would mention cars. So with cars, at least Canada, US, if your car meets EPA, so Environmental Protection Agency standards for emissions, you would have a sticker. It'd be in the hood of your car. Open up your car, look at the hood. So the top, underneath, and you'll probably have a sticker saying something like EPA compliance. That's a good sign. You can then check that off your list. Next thing is it's called, either you need a letter of conformity or you need another sticker, usually in your door, that shows you comply with the safety standards of the Department of Safety, something like that, for, I think it's the DOT, so Department of Transportation. There's a safety component. You need to show that you meet US safety standards. If your vehicle was manufactured in the US, you're good to go. So if you've got a Chevy that was made in the US, great. If you've got a vehicle manufactured in Canada, you just need to make sure you have that second sticker for the safety compliance for US safety standards. Conformity, it's conformity to US safety standards. So make sure you got that sticker in your door, and you've got a sticker for the EPA, the emissions, environmental side of things, which again, most newer vehicles, especially if manufactured in the US, you're good. So if you have intent to import, you're going to state that when you get to the land border crossing, and you want to. So historically, you would have to have a form filled out, a couple forms, relatively easy to Google those. Now, what I've been told more recently is that those forms are not necessary. They will fill them out actually at the border for you. You can double check that at your time of doing this, but that's what I was told the last time. So things do change depending on when you listen to this episode and when you go through this. I mean, this stuff could be different. So be aware of that. But from my understanding, if you have those stickers, they'll check those stickers. You express your intent to import. Then you have a year from that date of importation to change your registration, get US plates, wherever it is that you're based out of, and do that whole deal. If you want to just drive your car, let's say you're that snowbird, and you're going down and you're just going to be there for 6 months, you don't need to do this. Most Canadian auto insurance companies give you 6 months out of Canada. So again, really catering to those snowbirds. If you're just doing, a 4-month stint and you drive back up and you're doing that every year, don't worry about importation. Don't worry about any of this. Just tell them I'm going here for, 4 months. I spend the winter here and go back, and, you're good. You don't have to import it. Now, if you want to leave the car down there, import the car. Once you've imported the car and you have that year, you'll probably have to do some version of it. And every state's, maybe slightly different, but you need to register the vehicle. In order to register the vehicle, you'll have to check, you'll do another emissions test. So you'll just take it for an inspection. Texas, it's like $20, no big deal, but they want to inspect those emissions and make sure the car is operable. And then you'll do a check for if the car is stolen. So a police check, usually, you'll have to look at your state and where you're at, but you're going to want to get in touch with that process. Usually if you go out of the city, there's a shorter wait, and you can go to a police station and they'll have like 1 day a month or something, or maybe you can make an appointment, or you just show up and then the cop will run the VIN of the vehicle and maybe your plates too. I don't know. They can't usually run international plates, but maybe they can. But at least the VIN, and they'll just check if the car is stolen. They'll say, okay, no, it's all good. You take those forms to so here you take it to like the county office, the DMV, it was but it was a county office. It wasn't the DMV. I'm just trying to think. No, to register the vehicle, I didn't take the DMV is where you'd get a license. Like if you need a US license, it's a whole other process. Essentially, they want you, at least in Texas, they want you to give up your Canadian license, or you have to take a written and a driving assessment. So also up to you on that. But this is all only relevant if you're planning on, sticking around for more than a year. So just thinking about that. Again, research this stuff. This is just my experience. But you got a year from when you bring in the car, and the customs agent will give you all of the forms that you need. So you would go register the vehicle at the county office, give the emissions, the safety inspection form, give the notice that, the car is good and not stolen, the police report, give all the customs forms, and then you would be given a plate. You'd be given a new ownership, or in the US, they call it a title, and then you'd be good to go. You'd put the new plates on, and then make sure that you have insurance. You'd have to show proof of insurance on the vehicle, and you'd be good to go. So that process is also not, I think people get sort of overwhelmed with these things. Just make a checklist, and it's really not that many steps. Again, barring like it's not an old car, or, like there are all these kind of caveats. So if you want to import, I don't know, a 1965 muscle car, you might have to look into the details. But if we're talking newer models, you're probably good to go. I hope this has been useful. It's certainly not the most fun episode, but I think hearing it, at least for me, is helpful. And I've shared this with different friends, and it's like, okay, I keep saying the same stuff over and over. I might as well record it so that more people can benefit. And also, if anyone asks, I can just send this along because it's just nice and consolidated. So yeah, I wish you really luck in this whole process, and patience. And if you do want that lawyer recommendation, reach out. I hope you take good care until I see you next time.